And good afternoon, producer Susan. Have you had turned your heat on yet?
I have not, but I did turn the air conditioning off.
Okay. And you got a heat pump now, right? So you don't have to start your furnace?
Yeah, so actually that's what it is. I did switch the heat pump from cool
Ooh,
to automatic.
automatic. So do you know if it turned on to give you any heat?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I could feel some warmth coming out.
Okay. So you did have the heat on. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
but not the furnace.
Not the furnace. Okay. Well, good. All right. Well, today's the August 20, excuse me, today's September 25th. We're 3 days into the 4 days actually into fall. Was
Mhm.
fall started on Sunday with the autumnal equinox. So anyway, today is September 25th. And you want to hear what we're going to try to squeeze in today?
Yeah, what's on the agenda?
All right. Our quote of the week today is by Anonymous, but it's about the types of people who initiate, spread, and believe conspiracy theories. I'm sure you know a couple of people like that, right?
Mhm.
You don't know any flat earthers, do you? And that we didn't land
No,
on.
I don't.
Okay.
I tend to hang out with only educated people.
Okay. Um, You may be aware of this one. Our stupidest thing I've heard a week. We'll tell you about a high school principal in New Hampshire who called the police to have them remove several parents from a soccer game just because of the wristbands they were wearing, which I thought was an egregious violation of the First Amendment. We'll talk about
Absolutely.
that. Um, in a close runner-up, we'll tell you why Kamala Harris's campaign promise to build 3 million new homes during her first term as president, if she's elected, is not mathematically possible. Have you heard that campaign promise?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, she's promised, to end the housing shortage, that she's going to use government funding to help build 3 million new homes. We're going to tell you why that's mathematically not possible.
Yeah.
Um, you know who Bill Maher is, right?
Yeah, the talk show host.
And he's very, very liberal. He's a comedian, talk show host, incredibly liberal.
Mhm.
Well, even Bill Maher now has put in why he's not voting for Kamala Harris. It's really funny. Bill Maher's got great satire.
And he is a liberal too.
He's a flaming liberal, but he comes out, he really just slams Kamala Harris. We'll play that. And again, we talked last week. Why do we play these things about Kamala Harris? Well, whenever Donald Trump says something stupid, you can't switch the TV channel without hearing about it. But when Kamala Harris says something stupid, you never hear about it. So that's why we play it here. And on that same note, we'll play another clip of, we've already had Kamala Harris' Southern accent, right? Well, apparently she's got
Yep.
several more accents. And somebody put together a collage. What's the right word when somebody puts together
Um,
a
uh,
montage?
yeah, that's a good word, maybe.
A montage of her
I
various
didn't have
acts.
enough coffee today.
Okay. You going to buy any of that candy corn coffee
Oh,
from her?
hell no.
By the way, for those who aren't listening, I sent her a thing. I know she has a Keurig coffee maker. They've come out now with a Halloween candy corn flavored coffee pod for your Keurig maker. So,
Yes, I believe that candy corn should be poured into the trash can and then you eat a Reese's peanut butter cup
right.
instead.
All right. Um, we'll also tell you about one of the most deceptive and outrageous news headlines, not only all week. I think it's the most deceptive news headline I've read all year. And we'll tell you why. A published report that claimed that this is a quote: shots were fired into a Democratic campaign headquarters in Arizona, was just an outrageous exaggeration of what really happened. And that could have been the most stupidest thing I've heard all week, but it was a runner-up. Something else that happens only once a year happened Monday. You know what only happens once a year besides Christmas and Thanksgiving?
Ugh.
The FBI comes out with their annual
Oh,
national crime report where they
yes, your favorite report of the year.
my favorite report of the year, the FBI, and we'll give you some statistics out of the FBI, and it's the collection because every police agency, whenever they arrest somebody for felony, whatever, they fill out this standardized report and they send a copy to the FBI, who then uh, summarizes and totals them and gives you all these neat national statistics. So we'll tell you how things have changed from last year to this year. Did you hear about the shooting this weekend in Birmingham where 4 people were killed and
I
17?
did, unfortunately, yes.
Well, we'll give you some background on that. And even though the media called it a mass shooting, we're going to tell you why it technically wasn't a mass shooting. And we're going to give you some other perspective on that. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Hermitage, Tennessee, where a homeowner shoots and kills one of 2 armed thugs that had invaded his home and attacked his wife as they were stealing his possessions. All right. So you ready to, anything you want me to try to throw in there, squeeze in there?
No, that sounds like a lot to cover in 30 minutes.
All right. So here's our quote of the week. It's by Anonymous, but I just thought it was great. This is about, and by the way, I get people send me, listeners send me stuff, conspiracy theories. Um, I never repeat, forward, or post a conspiracy theory unless I've validated it. So here's the thing about that: most conspiracy theories are initiated by haters, spread by fools, and believed by idiots. What do you think about that?
Yep.
Initiated by haters, spread by fools, and believed by idiots. And this goes back to the concept of Karl Marx about useful idiots. And again, a useful idiot was someone who would believe, repeat, and act on a lie told to them by the leadership. And I can't tell you how many. And I'll see some of these conspiracy, and they start popping up all over different websites. I see conservative conspiracy theories. I see. We already talked about how the liberal conspiracy theory that the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, where Trump got shot in the ear, was not real. It was staged by the Trump campaign, and that was actually ketchup on his ear. That was one to this day, by the way, that's still being repeated. We talked about that one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go on to what I believe is the stupidest thing I've heard all week. And this must surely be one of the most egregious and blatant violations of the First Amendment that I've ever encountered. So, a high school principal, again, a public high school is a government entity in New Hampshire, called the police to have several parents removed from the viewing stands during a girls' soccer game because they were wearing wristbands that simply had the letters XX on them. Now, as we all know in genetics,
Mhm.
um, XX is the chromosome sequence for females, and
Mhm.
XY is the chromosome sequence for males. And they were doing this as a form of silent protest because
Mhm.
the school had decided to allow a boy who said, "Well, I identify as a girl." They decided to let that biological male compete not only on the girls' soccer team, but to compete against other girls.
Mhm.
So this was their silent protest. They weren't no signs. They weren't chanting. They were simply sitting in the stands. And he said, "You can't have those on your wrist." And they said, "We believe we can." Well, I don't think you can. And he called the police. So, again, he's trying to infringe upon their free speech. And then I'm really pissed at the cops because when the cops came, and the principal told the cops, "I want them removed because of the wristbands they're wearing." If I was a cop, I would have told the principal, "I'm sorry, sir, they're not breaking any laws." And I
Yeah.
would,
What law were they breaking?
yeah, what law were they breaking? Um, so I'm sure, by the way, that they will sue him in the school system,
Good for them.
and I have no doubt that they will win. In fact,
Mhm.
if I was the ACLU, I would take up this case for them on
Mhm.
a pro bono basis because that is one of the most blatant and egregious acts of infringing on free speech. And again,
Mhm.
it's one thing if it was a private school. A private school could say, "Well, we have our policies and you're
Mhm.
violating," but the public school is a government entity, and the government, again, the First Amendment, the government shall pass no law infringing on the right of free speech. And
Well,
simply,
and even public schools do have policy that's printed, published, well published about like, not wearing profanity on your t-shirts or, certain dress codes like
right,
no midriffs, things like that. But and I think that's just, out of
yeah,
respect. And I think that people would, but yeah,
yeah.
wearing a bracelet with an X or an XY on it.
It was a pink wool wristband, maybe 4 inches long, and unless you were, within 5 feet of them, then you couldn't even see they were wearing
Yeah.
them. By the way, do you know that the reason nude strip clubs are legal is because the Supreme Court many years ago ruled that nude dancing is a form of expression?
I didn't know that, but I did know it was legal.
Yeah, it's legal because it was some cities or states tried to outlaw it, and they said it's a form of expression. And the
Mhm.
Supreme Court said, "Yeah, it is."
And I know there's laws about like whether or not they can serve alcohol or not, or
Oh yeah, then they can
things like
pass laws
that.
about alcohol, but yeah, you can in some states you can't get a liquor license if you're a topless club, but
Mhm.
it's absolutely form of free speech. Anyway, um, I can't wait to see what happens with that one next. But again, I'm also really upset with the cops for doing what the principal asked them to do. Because if you're a cop and you know anything about the Constitution, which I think you should know, they should have told the principal, "I'm
I think
sorry,
that should be
sir."
mandatory for law enforcement to know the Constitution.
Constitution, right, or at least have a rudimentary knowledge. All right.
Well, I think every American should have a rudimentary knowledge,
No,
but I
so the
think police need to have the next level of, understanding.
Right. And by the way, here's something that's also always misconstrued. The First Amendment not only talks about freedom of speech, but also in that same First Amendment talks about the freedom of religion. And a lot of people think that the First Amendment um, prohibits churches from involving themselves in politics, and it doesn't. It says a government shall make no laws infringing upon the practice of religion. It's a one-way street. It says the government can't interfere with religion, but it doesn't say anything about religion interfering with government. So a lot of people think it's a two-way street. No, it's a one-way street. Now, the IRS says if you want to keep your tax-exempt status, you can't endorse political candidates and you can't donate money to their campaigns. But if you want to speak out on political issues such as abortion or, whatever it is, housing, you're free to do that. Um, but uh, but churches and priests can absolutely involve themselves in the affairs of government, but government cannot involve themselves in the affairs of the church. Um, were you aware of that distinction?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah. So when people talk about separation of church and state, that separation is a one-way street, not a two-way street. All right. So you tell me if this is if this is the most deceptive headline, and this was on NBC, New York Post, NPR, Axios, and this was the headline: "Shots fired into Democrat campaign office." Now, what comes to mind when you hear shots fired or gunfire? Some use the word shots fired, otherwise gunfire. In the words into Democrat campaign office in Arizona. Now, what?
It sounds like it's an attack, maybe an assassination attempt or an attack, or
Yeah. And do you know what it really was?
I believe it was just BB guns or
Somebody
pellet.
came around after midnight with a BB gun and broke a couple of windows with a BB gun. It was closed. It was dark. There were no gunshots. A BB is not a gunshot. Nothing penetrated.
Yeah,
No
I've
bullets.
been shot with a BB gun. It
Yeah.
doesn't even break the skin.
But if the headline has been some, Democrat windows broken in Democrat campaign committee office by BB gun, do you think that would have been national news?
Oh, absolutely.
BB gun breaking
Oh,
windows?
BB gun? No, no, not at all. I mean, it was probably a bunch of like juvenile delinquents, goofing off.
Yeah, or even if it was some pissed off, Republican. But the fact, I mean, if the headline was windows broken in Democratic campaign office by BB gun, but people wouldn't even bother to read it. But no, they had to say gun. In fact, I'm going to read you some of the exact headlines if I can find them here. Hang on one second. Let me
You did send them to me earlier. Let me see if I can pull them up quickly.
Yeah, there were 3 or 4 different headlines. Do you have them handy?
Uh, oh, let's see. Yeah, you did send them to me. Where'd they go?
If you can't find them, I can. I can find them right here. Hang on. If you can, let's see. You have a race to see if you can
Let's
find them
see.
first.
I get too many emails.
Oh, here we go. I got them. So
Okay.
here's 3 of the headlines. New York Post: shots fired into Democrat campaign headquarters, or Kamala Harris campaign office damaged by gunfire, or shots fired into Democrat campaign office. Now, again, when you hear that stuff, you assume that somebody either fired rifle or pistol bullets into that campaign office while it was occupied.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was a BB gun after midnight that broke a window. I mean, I'm just so, and that's why we call this news in perspective. You won't hear on TV,
Hmm.
because if you just saw the headline, nobody on TV is going to say, "Oh, it was just a BB gun that broke some windows after midnight." You won't hear that I guarantee you won't hear that
Yep.
on TV. That's why the subtitle of the show is News in Perspective. You won't hear on TV.
Mhm.
Anything you want to add to that before we move
Yeah,
on?
no, that's definitely misleading
Okay.
headlines.
All right. Well, let's move on to Bill Maher, who's, Bill's a funny guy, but flaming liberal. Now, he's always been, for years, he's been taking shot at every Republican president and every Republican candidate. He used to rag on George Bush, and he was a big supporter of Barack Obama. But here's what Bill Maher thinks about uh, Kamala Harris. And this is from a guy who's a framing liberal. And here we go. Uh, Hang on. Whoop, got to turn the sound on.
Asian president, but I don't vote for who will be the first. I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers. In 3 years as vice president, she's been quieter than an electric car. And it's not fair that she's not popular. She's intelligent and accomplished, and in fact, was put in charge of the border. And look at how, okay, bad example. President, first Black woman president, and first Asian president. But I don't vote for who will be the first. I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers. In 3 years as vice president, she's been quieter than an electric car. And it's not fair that she's not popular. She's intelligent and accomplished, and in fact, was put in charge of the border. And look at how, okay, bad example.
So what do you think about Bill Maher?
Yeah, I mean, clearly he did add some additional, jokes in his commentary, but yeah, the root of his commentary is, yeah, he's
spot on. And and what I like about Bill Maher is that he will rag on Democrats. So he'll probably still vote for Kamala Harris, but he's not one of these guys that just so over the top that all Republicans are evil and all Democrats are walk on water. So I just thought that was pretty good of Bill Maher. I think we played a clip of him before talking about somebody, didn't we? About Biden.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we was talking about Biden. All right. Now we already played a couple of weeks ago Kamala Harris showcasing her Southern accent, right?
Yep.
Well, here's a guy, and by the way, this is a Black man, by the way, who has put together a montage of her. Apparently, she has more than just one alternate accent, and here's his montage of her demonstrating several different accents, and here we go.
Had sister girl Kamala.
Hello to all my divine.
Let me back this up.
You had sister girl Kamala.
Hello to all my divine nine brothers and sisters.
Then you had Southern Kamala.
We're gonna do it again in 2024.
Now I want to introduce you to Señorita Kamala.
I love you back.
Kamala Harris is a de facto presidential candidate for all people. She believes in absolutely nothing, knows absolutely nothing about what she really stands for, has done virtually nothing over the past 4 years, but opened the southern border wide open to people who really do not care about or love this country. And since she is so fundamentally empty, she will be whoever she needs to be to pander to any audience that she's around.
And I'll stop it there. He goes on for another minute, but he starts.
It's interesting because if you or I, as pasty white folk, made any attempt to mimic another nationality or race
accent, right?
Yeah, in any way, whether it's accent or any other way, we'd be ridiculed.
Yeah, I think
the fact that she gets away with it multiple.
Yeah,
different. She's done this many times.
And the first clip was a little clear. He said and here we have Sister Harris. In other words, she came out with her black. It was her, she calls it sister, it was her Black accent. Then she had the Southern accent. Then she had the Latina accent. And so, and then of course with her normal speaking voice. So that's, 4 different modes. So that's this Black guy basically saying she's a chameleon and she panders to the audience. And I quite frankly think it's insulting to have somebody come up there and try to mimic your accent and your dialect.
Yeah. So, and we certainly would be ridiculed if we had done that.
Yep, absolutely.
Or anything close.
Yep. All right. You want to move on to FBI crime statistics?
Yeah, your favorite reports of the year.
All right. So let's first of all start with what types of guns are killing people. Everybody says, assault weapons. So by the way, so here's the so 17,000 people were killed by guns last year in 2023, which actually, by the way, is a dramatic increase from 2022 when 19,000, call it 20,000, when 19,939. So why is that significant? Well, in 2022 and 2023, there were roughly 20 million new guns sold in each of those years. So here you have 40 million new guns added to the inventory of guns circulating in this country. And did the gun homicide rate go up or down? No, it went down by more than 10%. I think that's noteworthy, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a
Okay.
lot of that's a lot of increase for 300 million Americans.
Yeah, by the way, there's now over 400 million guns in this country. We now have a ratio of guns to people in excess of 1. But, the liberals say more guns equal more gun deaths. Well, apparently not. Now, if you include suicides, it's true, yes, because if there's a gun in the home and the person is suicidal, they
Mhm.
will use the gun. But in terms of gun violence, and by the way, suicide by gun is not gun violence. It's no more gun violence than suicide by rope is rope by hanging is rope violence. So don't ever let anybody tell you that suicide by gun is an act of gun violence, because if
Mhm.
you believe that, then you have to say that hanging is an act of rope violence,
Mhm.
or that intentional drug overdose is an act of pill violence. But anyway, so here we have 40 million new guns added to the inventory circulating in this country, and the number of gun homicides dropped by 2,000. It was a decline of 2,226 gun homicides. So no, more guns do not mean more gun violence. Now, let's talk of who's getting killed by those guns, and this is really shocking, but unfortunately, it's a continuation of a trend that's been going on for many years. Well, first of all, let me talk about what type of guns are doing the killing. 90% of all gun homicides were committed, you think, by assault rifles?
No, I don't think so.
What do you think were responsible for 90% of all gun homicides?
Probably just your average handgun.
Yep, handguns, 86.9%. Um, and you want to take a guess of how many how many homicides were committed with rifles of all types, bolt action rifles, pump action rifles,
I don't think it's very high.
511. 511
Mhm.
of right, and so-called assault rifles are just a subset of all rifles. Now, let me put that in perspective. You want to, so 511 people were killed with rifles of all types. You want to guess how many people were stabbed to death?
Oh, many more.
Triple that,
Yeah.
1,562. You want to take a guess at how many people were beaten or choked to death with no weapon, just hands, feet, or fists?
Many more than that. I'd say it's probably in the thousands.
Well, it's 659,
Oh,
which
okay.
is still
That's actually not as high as I would have thought.
which is still higher. More people were
Yeah.
beaten, choked, or choked to death with hands, feet, or fist than there were killed with rifles of all types.
Mhm.
By the way, you'll find that on the expanded homicide data table 8. And Susan, producer Susan, I'll give you the link to the
Mhm.
FBI report to include so
Yep.
people can click on it.
Yeah.
But here's what's sad, and this is not new this year. In terms of who is getting killed and who is doing the killing, despite accounting for just 12.8% of the general population, the FBI is reporting that in those cases where the race of the victim was known or reported, that Black victims accounted for 54% of those murdered. Can you imagine
That's a
12.5% of
shame.
the population accounts for 50% of those people being
Mhm.
killed?
And it's sad too, but I don't, and I'm sure that with some additional digging of the statistics that you have from the FBI, to see that like many of those deaths occur in inner city places like Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. Chicago, St. Louis, New Orleans. And by
Mhm.
the way, and in terms of the offenders or the assailant, now, unfortunately, they cannot always identify. A lot of murders go unsolved, meaning they don't know who the killer was, right?
Mhm.
But
Yep.
for those cases where the race of the offender was known or determined,
Mhm.
again, Black offenders accounted for 56% of all assailants. Can you imagine?
That's also, that's a shame.
It's a shame, and it's shocking that
Mhm.
12% of the population accounts for 54% of the victims and 56% of the offenders. And
And
that
we've talked, about why, especially young teenage 20 somethings, about, home life and, not having a positive male role model in the house. And
right. It's the Barack Obama quote, Father's Day
Mhm.
2008. And we've talked about it before, but he quoted the statistics. Children growing up in a home without a father, are like 9 times more likely to wind up in jail, 10 times more likely to drop out of high school. It's just really, really sad. And unfortunately, back then when he first gave that speech in June of 2008, I believe it was 54% of Black children were growing up in a home without a father. Today, I believe that number is 74%. So, all right. Which brings us, by the way, to Birmingham. And I'll tell you why those two are linked. So you heard about it, right?
I heard about the shooting, but I didn't hear about the details of like who did it or how it transpired.
Well, here's what the media reported. And this is the only thing the media reported. They said this was a club in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. It was around midnight. Car pulls up. 3 guys get out with machine pistols. Now, do you know what a machine pistol is?
Yeah, it's an addition that you can put onto a pistol that makes it almost like a automatic pistol.
Yep, it's an illegally modified. There's something called a Glock switch. You can Google it. It's a little gizmo you can add to the back of a Glock pistol, which converts it from a semi-automatic, which means you get 1 bullet for every 1 pull of the trigger. So if you want 3 bullets, you have to pull the trigger 3 times. It turns it into a machine pistol where if you just pull the trigger back and hold it, the gun just sprays bullets. And there's a YouTube video, maybe I'll put a link to it, where an ATF agent is demonstrating where he puts a 30-round magazine in a Glock pistol with one of these gizmos, pulls the trigger, and the gun just sprays, and it's completely uncontrollable. The gun, and this is a trained shooter, he's holding the gun as tight as he can, and despite that, he fires 30 rounds in 2.3 seconds. It's just, 2.3. And the gun, you watch the bullets, they go up and to the right. I mean, they just, totally uncontrollable. You can't aim the thing, which is why, by the way, the police believe it was a targeted hit for one individual, who, by the way, was a felon who'd been charged with murdering another person a couple of years earlier and got off. He was acquitted. So the police believe that he was the target by relatives of the victim that he is allegedly killed. So apparently the goal was to shoot and kill him because he got away with murder. But they killed 4 people, 3 of whom, by the way, were convicted felons, and wounded 17.
Wow.
And again, when you're shooting machine pistols, you can't control them. So here's what the media doesn't tell you. If you look at the right video clips of the people milling around at the club, it was a Black club. All of the patrons were Black. The 4 people killed were Black. So this was, clearly an act of Black on Black crime, which if you go back to the FBI statistics that we just talked about, this is the type of thing. When you hear about these club shootings, which you hear about once a month, I don't think I've only talked about one, but there's typically about 1 a month. It's typically outside of a Black club, and it's gang violence. It's Black on Black gang violence. So that's where these statistics come from. And again, you can actually Google the name of the people killed, and then you can Google their pictures. And all 4 of the fatalities, there were 3 Black guys and a young Black woman, were the fatalities. There were no white people at that club Saturday night when this shooting broke out. Now, why wasn't it an actual mass shooting? You want to take a guess?
Because it was targeted.
Right. There's a couple. According to the U.S. government,
it wasn't random.
Right. And here's what both the U.S. government, I think most people, when they hear the term mass shooting, it is defined as and typically understood to be a single shooter killing 4 or more victims at random in a public place. So the key is single shooter at random public place. Well, here you had multiple shooters. The victims were not it was not random. He wasn't just saying, "Oh, I'm going to shoot this." They were trying to kill one specific person. So it wasn't a single shooter, and the victims were not chosen at random, which means technically, even though 4 people were killed, it wasn't a defined mass shooting per the standard. All right. I'll tell you one more quick one. I think we got time for this. They have any big fishing contests in Pennsylvania with cash?
Oh yeah, fishing, especially trout around here, is very big.
Okay. Well, in Michigan, They had a fishing contest with a total of $29,000 in prize money, and uh, and two guys, and a lot of prize money. The biggest fish, first place, second
Mhm.
prize. So, and they were fishing for walleye pike. Well, these two guys have their fish come in, and their fish are kind of average size, and these fish, are typically coming in between 4.5 pounds, and they weigh these fish, and they're over 7 pounds each, and people are going, what? You can't get a 14-ounce fish to weigh 7 pounds. So they felt the judge grabbed the fish, started squeezing the belly, felt something hard. They took a knife and cut it open. They had stuffed ping pong ball sized lead weights
Wow.
down the throats of the fish. So each fish had about 2 pounds of lead weight jammed into its stomach.
Mhm.
And guess what? Because it was a fraud, an attempted fraud for over $1,000. They were each charged with a felony.
Wow. That's
And
interesting. I mean, you do hear about cheating on these fishing contests regularly, but I didn't realize you could make it a felony with the prize money.
well, yeah, because it was fraud to attempt
Mhm.
to win something in excess of $1,000. So in addition to them being charged with a felony, I don't think they'll do any jail time,
Mhm.
but they'll probably have to move out of that town. I mean, can you imagine having to live in that town? It's not a big town up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so each of these guys, and how stupid can you be? You take a
Yeah.
4.5 pound fish and you put 2.5 pounds of lead in the stomach. Come on.
Yeah.
You put a half a pound of lead, not 2.5 pounds of lead. All right. So how much we got enough time? How much time we
Yeah,
got?
we got about 5 minutes.
All right, good. Well, we're gonna move on to our taxpayer relief shot, and I'll let the sheriff of Santa Rosa County explain to you why we call him a taxpayer relief shot. And here we go. See?
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
Or we can go to Sheriff Grady Judd, who is a little more well, a little more descriptive. And here we go.
But we have received information in social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
And that was Sheriff Grady Judge from Polk County. All right. So tonight we got one from Tennessee, where two armed thugs invade this guy's home, start to beat up his wife, and start to try to steal his stuff. And here's how this one goes. Hang on.
Find robbers inside your house. That's what happened here in Hermitage, and it ended with the homeowner shooting and killing one of them. News Channel 5's Sarah McCarthy is live tonight at the Hermitage precinct, and Sarah, people there have to be looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, one of the main questions we have tonight is whether this was a targeted or random crime. Right now, it's not clear if the victims knew those robbers. But what we do know is that homeowner Brent Bishop came home to find two men inside his house attacking his wife. Those suspects then hit Bishop over the head and demanded he open his gun safe. They stole 3 long guns and a pistol. And in the meantime, Bishop's wife had run next door for help. As the robbers attempted to make off with the stolen weapons, Bishop grabbed a 5th gun from a different room. And when he stepped outside to find his wife, he saw the suspects in his front yard and fired. Those shots killed 27-year-old Terry Adams Jr. Adams has several prior convictions, including theft, assault, and burglary. He's also a suspect in a February robbery at the same Hermitage house. Now, police say that second suspect dropped the stolen weapons as he ran off. And today I spoke with neighbors who say they saw him hop a fence to get away.
What? His buddy dropped and ran, left him there
Wow,
to bleed out?
shocking.
But right now, we don't have a description of that man. It's also unclear if the homeowner will face any charges.
Now, the only possible thing is that when he went outside. Now, if they had guns in their hands, if they were facing him, then it was justifiable. But if they were just trying to flee, and he shot them while they were running away outside of his house, then that could be, anyway, it'll be interesting to see if the district attorney tries to charge him. He can just, of course, he's the only witness to what actually happened. So unless he shot and killed this guy, I mean, if he shot him in the chest, then I think the district attorney would be crazy to try and prosecute him, because clearly they had guns. They had guns because they just took guns from his house, so they were armed. And if they were facing him with guns in the hand, I think you can make a reasonable case to a jury that you had a reasonable fear for your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Yeah, so Grady Judd and what's the sheriff in Santa Rosa County?
I don't know his name.
Why am I blanking? Anyway, both those sheriffs are in Florida, and they're getting ready to face. They're going to get a hit from Hurricane Helena today, tomorrow, and those sheriffs are supporting that. First of all, you should leave your house if you're in the
right
order to do so. But this is one of those times where like looting is rampant, and those sheriffs are going to support that you protect yourself and your property with a gun.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. If you're going to stay there and the power goes out and the police can't respond because you're busy with all sorts of other, hurricane related issues, you are ultimately responsible for your own safety. So
yeah.
Yep. So they
this is the exact occasion where those two sheriffs in Florida are 100% supporting that you protect yourself and your property as you need to do so with a gun.
With the gun, absolutely. All right. I don't want to run out of time here, so I just want to thank everybody who listened to this podcast for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about things I find of interest and importance. And I hope you found those topics as interesting and important as I did. And again, we try to talk about things you don't hear on TV. That's why we call it News in Perspective you won't hear on TV. If you want to see some of the materials and links to some of the things you heard me talk about, producer Susan will try to get those up on the Jerzee Joe website in a couple of days.
Including the FBI crime stats.
Well, not the stats, but if you want to do the stats themselves, because there was some math involved. If you want to actually post the stats, but then post the link to where you there's a whole bunch of different things. You can slice and dice it by age, by sex, by state. But if you want to post the math I did, by all means, producer Susan, go ahead and post the math. Just remember the Jerzee Joe website. Jerzee spelled J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, Jerzee, JerzeeJoe.com. You want to send me an email with a question, comment, or suggested show topic, just send it to joe@JerzeeJoe.com. And with that, producer Susan, anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, you have a good week, and I'll talk to you next week. You take care.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.